Am I live? Well, good evening. So my name is Micah Winsler, and we had a little bit of an issue with getting our streaming link to the students. So I'm actually going to delay just for a few minutes before we get into our time tonight. Tonight we're going to be going through the last in our series on Moses called Stink, Stank, Stuck. We're going to have a little bit of a worship time. And then we'll have the message, and we'll have a little bit more worship. And then I will dismiss everybody back into the Zoom groups so that they can do their youth groups and be into that. I also am going to take just a few extra minutes this evening at the end of our time to actually pray for the Crosswalk students before we dismiss. So if you want to stick around for that, you can. But with that, I think that we probably have, I'm going to double check, but I think we probably have enough people into this that we can get started. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to lead us in worship.
Let's worship. And I am running to your promise, holding fast to everything you said to me. You can take me through the fire. You can ignite the flame inside of me. I'm on the road less traveled. I'm on my way to your heart, Lord. And what no eye has seen, you will show me your heart, Lord. Show me your heart, Lord. Open up my eyes to see you, my mind to know you. My soul longs only for you. Let me hear your voice resounding, your words creating a brand new heart in me. My desire is to love you, and you're the light that will guide me through the night. You are with me in the battle, bringing peace to the war inside my heart. I know your love's no limits. In every space your love invades. You're calling me out, and I'm ready. Open up my eyes to see you, my mind to know you. My soul longs only for you. Let me hear your voice resounding, your words creating a brand new heart in me. Open up my eyes to see you, my mind to know you. My soul longs only for you.
So sorry about that little mix-up at the beginning. But like I said, my name is Micah Winsler, and this is Digital Crosswalk, and we're so glad that you are here. But I want to know how many of you would trade me $30 for something that would be worth $100 million in 10 years. So you give me $30 right now, and I will give you something that will be worth $100 million in just 10 years. Would you make that trade with me? Well, there's a famous instance of this happening in the recent past. So in the chat there in YouTube Live, I want to know if anybody can guess what famous instance where someone traded something that was worth $30 that would in 10 years be worth $100 million. Does anyone have a guess of at all of what I'm talking about? Throw it there in the chat if you can think of it. It was about 10 years ago, actually, and in fact, May 22nd, which is just a few days away, we're going to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of this thing where somebody gave up something that was worth about $30 in exchange for something that 10 years later, now, would be worth $100 million. Does anyone have a guess? Oh, Dan Kinney's got it. He's got it. This coming Friday is May 22nd, and it marks the 10-year anniversary of when Laszlo Heinekes paid 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 Papa John's pizzas. At the time, 10,000 Bitcoin was worth about $30. But today, that same 10,000 Bitcoin is worth about $94 million, just shy of $100 million. 10 years ago, only the nerdiest among us had any idea what Bitcoin is, or what Bitcoin was. And even today, most of us really don't even have an idea of what a digital or cryptocurrency is, much less how they work. But there is one thing that we do know. We know that they can be quite valuable, and we wish that we had a lot. I wish I had 10,000 Bitcoin, but I don't. And actually, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about things that are valuable. What is truly valuable? So, as I said before, if we haven't met, my name is Micah Winsler, and today we're concluding our series on Moses called Stink, Stank, Stuck. We've looked at, in the first week, what defines us. Does our circumstance define us? And then we looked at how we can get stuck in discontentment. We can get stuck in believing lies, and we can get stuck in waiting. And now let's take a look at how we can get stuck in clinging to things that really don't have any true value, while we discount or we ignore things that have enormous value. When we last talked about Moses and Israel, they were at Mount Sinai, receiving the laws and the commandments from God. But before leaving Sinai, they made the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle and all the furnishings for the tabernacle, and then they were setting out for the promised land. And in Numbers 13, Israel gets close to the promised land. The land of Canaan is what it was called. And God does this thing where it's a fascinating story. I'd encourage you to read it. But he tells them to send 12 spies to go check out the land of Canaan and to assess it. The 12 spies come back, and 10 of them are scared of the inhabitants of the land. 2 of them are saying, we can take it, man. The Lord is with us. We can take it. But the 10 spies who are scared of the inhabitants convinced the rest of Israel to not go into the land that God had promised them. So instead of trusting God, they trusted their own fear. So Israel refused to go into the land that God had promised them. So after everything that Moses has been through, he finally gets to the land that has been promised, and the people that he has been coddling this entire time refuse to cooperate with God and go in and take the land that is theirs. Can you imagine this moment for Moses? This was his mission. This was what he was created to do. And as far as he knows, this is the whole reason he exists, to bring these people to this land, and they won't go in. Have you ever been stuck like that? Have you ever been stuck on the edge of all the good that you thought you could get from life, and someone or something else stands in the way? What if someone else's fear kept you from going in? What if someone else's problems kept you from fulfilling your purpose? How would you handle it? What if someone else's sin got in your way of something good that you had earned? How would you feel about them? How would you feel about that situation? Would you struggle to love? I've had things like this happen to me. I've been at the edge of things for which I longed and ached, sometimes for decades, only to be prevented from entering into something that I really wanted because someone else was opposing me. It's really hard to handle times like that well. It's hard to be gracious towards people and gracious in circumstances when that happens. But look at what Moses did. Because the people were disobedient and didn't trust God to take the land, check out what God says to them. We can read about it in Numbers 14, 11 through 12. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people despise me? And how long will they not believe in me? In spite of all the signs that I have done among them. I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you, talking to Moses, a nation greater and mightier than they. Now look at what Moses says to that. In Numbers 14:15 through 19, he says, whoa. Now, if you kill this people as one man, then the nations who have heard your fame will say it is because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land that he swore to give them, that he has killed them in the wilderness. And now, please let the power of the Lord be great as you have promised, saying, the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Please pardon the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your steadfast love, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt until now. I can't even get my mind around that. These people stand in the way of Moses and everything he could want from life. God declares judgment on them, and Moses could just stand by and let it happen, but he doesn't do that. Instead, he intervenes on their behalf, and he begs God not to destroy them. Moses was more concerned about the glory of God and the welfare of the people than he was about his own selfish desires. He was more concerned about them than he was about himself. And I'm really inspired by that. I think I would have trouble with that. I would probably have asked God if I could light the match when God said that he was going to toast these people. But Moses is a better man than I am. So Moses did not get stuck putting a higher value on his own selfish desires than the value he put on other people and the glory of God. God did still judge the people, though. And Moses had to endure some of that punishment with them. God's judgment was that they would have to remain stuck in the wilderness for 40 years until all the faithless adults of the nation had passed away. And then their children would be able to take the land of Canaan. Some of the people tried anyway to take the land, but it was futile. So they went back into the wilderness to serve a 40-year sentence. But one of them has done this before. Back at the beginning of our series, we saw that Moses had stood up for his people and was chased out of Egypt to the wilderness of Midian for 40 years. He's been here before. Can you imagine his frustration as he had to lead the people of Israel into the wilderness, knowing that he would be stuck there another 40 years? 40 years after 40 years after 40 years. I imagine that the dread and the weight of that would just crush and crumble his heart in his chest. And I can picture the sorrow and the depression that would eat away at him as the reality of another 40 years began to set in. But this time it wasn't his fault. It was their fault. The ones whom he had been trying like crazy to liberate and lead into this promised land, they were the reason that he had to go another 40 years into the wilderness. That had to be hard to endure. But Moses seems to have done pretty well with it. He led the people into the wilderness and they survived there. And now skipping way forward, there's many years and many stories that have gone on. And eventually we get to a point where Moses' sister passes away in the wilderness. And I wonder if at that point the weight of everything was finally starting to get to Moses. We can read about the next chapter in Numbers 20, verses 2 through 6. It says, "Now there was no water for the congregation. And they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, 'Would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness that we should die here, both we and our cattle? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place?' It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. I'm exhausted when I read that. Moses has put up with this kind of garbage for decades now. He has faced his own past. He has conquered his own fears. He has endured the rejection of his people. He has endured the stupid decisions of his people. He's endured being on the run for his life from Pharaoh. He has suffered consequences that he didn't really deserve because of their faithlessness. And now, yet again, these ungrateful jerks have the nerve to rise up against him and say that they were better off in Egypt. And I think something broke in Moses. Their offenses against him went beyond the grace that he had for them. Check out Numbers 20:7 through 11. And the Lord said to Moses, saying, take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to yield its water. So you shall bring water out of the rock for them and give to the congregation and their cattle. And Moses took the staff from before the Lord as he commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice. And water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank and their livestock. This is angry Moses. This is Moses who is exhausted and has just been trampled one too many times by the very people he was trying to save. And frankly, I don't blame him one bit. I can't take it for too long when people whom I love and am trying to help keep fighting against me and derailing every effort I make for them. Moses lasted a lot longer than I would. Now, there are two things to understand about this instance. First, Moses had been mistaken this whole time. It was not Moses who was saving these people and bringing them to the promised land. It was God. This is a huge lesson for us to remember. We are not anyone else's Savior. That responsibility is God's alone. That responsibility is God's alone. We love and we care. We obey God and we are sent, but we are never anyone's Savior. We are never responsible for anyone else's actions. This is going to happen to each of us at some point. We are going to desperately care about someone, and we may even be called to minister to them in some specific way. The danger is when we start to become codependent and take responsibility for them in ways that are not meant for us. You are never responsible for the attitudes, behaviors, and actions of anyone else. You are responsible for your attitudes, your behaviors, and your actions alone. And then the second thing that we can understand from this passage about Moses striking the rock and getting angry is that even though Moses disobeyed God and struck the rock out of anger instead of speaking to the rock like God said, God still provided water for the people. You see, even though Moses' patience was gone, God's was not. God still cared about the people, and God still was going to provide for them. And this is actually why the first commandment is that we should have no other gods before him. In the 10 commandments that God gave to Moses on Sinai, he said in Exodus 20, verse 3, he said, you shall have no other gods before me. God wasn't saying this because he has a need for validation that only we can provide. God does not need anything. He doesn't want us to have other gods before him because he knows that nothing else can withstand the pressure of being God. Not even the great man Moses could be God for Israel. Money will fail you. Fame will fail you. Friends will fail you. Boyfriends and girlfriends and husbands and wives will all eventually fail us. Everything and everyone that is not God, that you try to make into God, will eventually fail. Only God will always have your best interests at heart with the capacity to see them through. So Moses' patience finally failed, and the consequence was pretty steep. Numbers 20, 12 through 13 say this. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and through them he showed himself holy. Now that feels pretty tragic. After everything that Moses has gone through, he will not be able to take these people into the promised land. So what do we make of his life? He started out basically as royalty in Egypt, but was driven out of the lap of luxury and into the wilderness. He was called out of the wilderness and had to face his own fears in going to Pharaoh to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And he had to lead a stubborn and rebellious people who constantly complained about everything. He had to intercede for them when they kept screwing things up. He had to endure going back into the wilderness because of their lack of faith, and then because his patience finally ran out, he was denied the promised land altogether. To put it bluntly, that sucks, right? Moses' life seems so tragic at face value. But I'm going to challenge that notion. We're going to reevaluate what is actually valuable. Just like the 10,000 Bitcoin seemed like they didn't have much value and Laszlo traded them for two pizzas, Moses actually had something of incredible value that is very easy for us to overlook. We're going to skip into the New Testament for a second to see how the New Testament looks back at Moses. In Hebrews 11, 23 to 27, it says this, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. What is this thing at the end of that says, enduring as seeing him who is invisible? We're going to conclude our time today in our whole series on Moses with a simple passage that's very easy to overlook as we examine Moses' life when we don't value the things that are truly valuable. Back in Exodus 33, 7 through 11. Now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, far off from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. And everyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, and all the people would rise up, and each one would stand at his tent door and watch Moses until he had gone into the tent. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. And when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, each at his tent door. Thus, the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. When Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. Face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. If there is one thing I'm struggling with in this COVID-19 pandemic, it's that I miss eye contact. You are looking at me, but I am not looking at you. Face to face. I miss face-to-face engagements with people whom I love. You know that I serve on the teaching team here at Trinity, and even though we do a weekly Zoom meeting, I miss seeing Marvin. I miss face-to-face conversations with Blake. I miss seeing Ben Diaz face-to-face. I miss Andrea Maynard and Dave Maxey face-to-face. I miss seeing some of my family face-to-face. And I think when this is all over, I am going to be such a blubbering dope when I finally get to see some people face-to-face. I'm telling you right now, get ready for weird. I will be just drooling all over myself, so happy and so giddy, and just staring at people because I can actually look at them face-to-face. I think I'll be even more like that when I finally get to see Jesus face to face. I'll be a blubbering idiot when I see the Father face to face, when I finally get to see the God who loved me so much. I won't be able to contain myself. But that's exactly what Moses got. He got to meet with God face to face as a man with his friend. When we take a serious look at our lives in the life of Moses and consider the things that are of true value, we can see that Moses didn't miss out on all that much by giving up a position of royalty and not being able to go into the promised land. No, Moses got to see God face to face as a man can meet with his friend. And I cannot think of anything more valuable than that. And now Catherine's going to lead us in another song of worship, and it is about meeting with God.
Our Father, all of heaven rolls your name, sing louder.
So yeah, Crosswalk, this concludes my time with you and in this series in Moses. And I am so thankful and I'm so blessed to have spent this time with you. I want you to know that I love each of you deeply, and I've been praying for you, and I've been laboring over this because I really care about you, and I really wish you all the best. And in fact, I want to dismiss us right now just by praying for you and trying to bless you in the Spirit as much as I can. So yeah, let's just pray right now. Yeah, Father, I pray that you would bless each one of these students with an abundance of your grace, with an abundance of your passion and your patience with them and for them. And God, I pray that you would meet with them where they are, that you would reveal yourself to them in your word, that you would meet with them even as you met with Moses, face to face as with a friend. And God, I pray that you would strengthen each of them in their faith, strengthen them as they are dealing with this pandemic and all of the struggles that it introduces to them. But God, I also want to especially pray for the seniors right now. God, I just pray that you would bless them. And I'm thinking of Ray, who's heading into MSU. God, I pray that you would bless him with his studies and that school would make sense to him next year and that you would give him direction. And God, I thank you so much for his family and how close and connected he feels to his family. And God, I pray for Catherine right now, who's heading off to LCC to study communications and journalism. God, I just pray that you would give her just a straight path into her school and into her study. And God, I pray that you would bless her at every turn. God, I pray for Luke, who's heading to Liberty and studying finance. God, I pray that you would just overwhelm him with your presence, with a sense of direction for his life, and with your blessing on him and everything that he does. And God, I pray for Maddie, who's heading to Taylor. God, I pray that you would bless her as well with direction and a sense of purpose and a sense of knowing that you are for her and that you love her. And God, I pray for Vince, who's headed to Grand Rapids Community College. God, I just pray that you would bless him as he goes off to play sports. I pray that you would bless him with protection against injury, that you would guard him and keep him healthy, and that he would also be able to focus on his studies and excel in everything that he does. And God, I pray for Michaela, who's going to Wayne State to study nursing. God, what an amazing thing to look at this pandemic and say, I want to go into nursing. God, I pray that you would bless her heart in that, and that you would go with her and that you would strengthen her, that you would help her to focus and excel in everything that she does. And God, I pray for Abigail, who's going to MSU. God, she's going to study music. And God, I just pray that you would bless her with an abundance of your presence, an abundance of even your creativity that you have delegated to her, and that you would help her to thrive in that. And God, I pray for Maggie, who's heading to Saginaw Valley State. God, even another one who's going to into the medical field, into nursing. God, I just thank you so much for Maggie and for her heart and for her servant's heart. And God, I pray that you would bless her and that you would multiply the mission that she can have in nursing. And God, I pray for Ethan, who's heading into Taylor University. God, I just pray that you would help him and bless him, and that you would make his path straight and make him know that he is secure as your son. And God, I pray that you would bless all of these students in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, if you're joining us tonight on YouTube, you are dismissed now, and we thank you so much for joining us. And Crosswalk, you are dismissed now into your Zoom breakout groups, and we just pray that you have a great time in there. So thank you for joining us, and God bless you.